morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we are looking at a brand new EP from Behemoth entitled A Forest. This Polish death and black metal band is one of the most, if not the most, prolific and successful extreme metal bands of the last decade. With a duo of critically acclaimed mega hit records under their belt, The Satanist and I Loved You at Your Darkest, the former of which regarded as one of the best metal albums not just of that time but possibly of all time, further propelled to almost mainstream success thanks to a string of massive stadium tours with the likes of Slayer, Lamb of God, Slipknot. Been a pretty damn good decade for Behemoth, to say the least, especially when factoring in the trials and tribulations of the band's lead singer and guitarist, Adam Darsky, more commonly known as Nergal. I mean, at the beginning of the last decade, he was practically knocking on heaven's door thanks to a severe bout of leukemia. Fast forward 10 years later, he's a modern metal superstar. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single metalhead that doesn't know even a little bit about The Satanist, about Behemoth. It's a rare, almost Rocky-style comeback story for Nergal and Behemoth that I don't think anybody could have anticipated. For these reasons, as well as the fact that, frankly, their music's fucking incredible if you ask me, Behemoth is one of my favorite black metal bands, and as such, I was very excited to get my hands on this new EP of Forest. Especially considering it's not supposed to be out for like another week. Shh, don't tell no one. But unfortunately, I'm leaving A Forest not necessarily disappointed, but definitely underwhelmed. And I can't tell if it has to do with the actual quality of the music, or if it has to do with the nature of this release, being an EP, therefore not being able to rise to the level, the grandeur of what is expected of a regular Behemoth studio album. Or if it's fucking both, for that matter. I can't really put my finger on it, even after multiple listens, but one thing is for sure, this is definitely one of Behemoth's weaker releases. Most of this EP is comprised of tracks that are, to paraphrase Nergal himself, a continuation of I Loved You at Your Darkest. I don't know if that means they made these tracks with the spirit of I Loved You at Your Darkest in mind, or if it means these tracks are literally left over from the creation of I Loved You at Your Darkest, cut off for time restraints. But they certainly do not feel as expressive, as expansive, as progressive, or as powerful as a majority of the tracks off of that record. It feels more like Behemoth paint by numbers, like somebody was able to narrow down the exact formula that Behemoth uses to write their songs and was able to recreate it on this EP. That's not to say these songs are inherently, even objectively, really that bad. They're well performed, they're well produced, there's some particularly strong drumming throughout both tracks, and I like a lot of the spirited guitar solos, but they're not especially memorable, and I'm not really seeing anything quite as declarative or inspired through these tracks that I may have seen on tracks like God Equals Dog or Bartzabel. If I am correct in assuming that these tracks were cut off of I Loved You at Your Darkest, I can understand why. They're just not as interesting. The other half of this EP is dedicated to a couple different interpretations of a classic The Cure song, A Forest, of which this EP takes its name from as well. One of these being a live cut of the track performed last year at Mary Chrysalis, the other being a studio track featuring Niklas Kavarforth of the Swedish black metal band Shining. Interestingly making it the second collaboration so far in 2020 from Niklas and Nergal, having previously worked on the track Confession for the last Me and That Man record. Structurally and aesthetically, the live cut and the studio cut are identical to each other, so let's just talk about both at the same time. They're fine. They're totally fine. Much like the other tracks, they're performed well, they're produced well, but the bigger problem here is that this particular cut doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of continues to drudge on the same pattern over and over and over again, growing a little bit more chaotic, growing a little bit more raucous with time, but never really blossoming into anything else. And while I liked Niklas's work on the Me and That Man record with Nergal, I'm not really feeling his work on this particular track. He's kind of sounding like some kind of weird goblin minion. The way he enunciates all of his words reminds me of some of the worst aspects of really early traditional Norwegian black metal, particularly given the lyrics of these songs as he's ranting and raving about the forest, the trees, over the course of like 5 minutes. With time, it even grows to be somewhat silly and hokey, almost as if it's a parody track trying to hold up a mirror to traditional black metal. Very piss-poor decision as well to have both versions of A Forest open this EP, as you are essentially listening to the same song over and over again over the course of 10 minutes before you really get any interesting original material. I would give this album a very unenthusiastic 2.5 out of 5. Behemoth just aren't really playing anything that inspired or powerful on this EP, and I can't help but wonder if this was put out maybe just to clean the slate in preparation for the band's next studio album. It's not an uncommon tactic among rock and metal bands, and I guess I'd rather them do it this way than throw all of their leftover material onto one album, a la the style of Use Your Illusion. But it is unfortunate nonetheless, especially when everything that has made Behemoth great in the last decade is simply not reflected in these tracks. The lush arrangements, the beating heart, the ferocity, it's just not present here. It's a decent way to kill 20 minutes of your time, and I imagine the truly diehard Behemoth fans will be able to have some fun with this, but honestly, that's about it. It's a decent way to kill 20 minutes of your time, and I'm sure the diehard Behemoth fans will have fun dissecting and analyzing it, but honestly, it's not really that great for much else. Behemoth does remain my favorite black metal band, but this is my least favorite release from them, to the point where if this was released by a no-name band that had no association to Behemoth, I may not have even reviewed it. 2.5 out of 5, it's okay, you might have some fun, but it's hardly essential. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.